In this module, I will go over generating graphs in Excel. Graphical representation of data often helps researchers see patterns in a dataset. They may gain increased insight by examining a figure, chart, or table that results from organizing the data in some fashion. In addition, it helps visualize our conclusions. Today, we will use this large dataset to examine information about different states in the U.S. To create graphs in Excel, we'll begin with a pivot table. Remember, we covered pivot tables in Module 2. So to create a pivot table, again, you're going to want to make sure you have the top left cell selected. Go to Insert, Pivot Table, and the data range that we want should already be selected here, and you're going to want to make sure it goes into a new worksheet, and click OK. And now we have our pivot table here to manipulate. So we can first, what we're going to want to do is drag state down into rows. And we're going to want to take the percent high school grads 1990, since that's the data we'll be looking at, and put it into the values box. And now, as you can see, it's taking a count, not a sum, which is not what we want because this data is not particularly useful to us. So we're going to go to value field settings, change it to sum, and OK. And now, as you can see, this data is much more relevant to what we're looking at. We also want to clean up the data a little bit by getting rid of unnecessary rows. So if you click on the drop-down arrow, we need to remove by unchecking blank, US white, US Hispanic, US African American, and United States, because this is demographic data, which is not what we're looking at. Well, it's ethnic demographic data, and we're looking at states right now. So we can hit OK to modify the pivot table, and now, as you can see, we only have data about the states. Now we can display the percent of high school students that graduated in each state as a graph. So we're going to go to Insert, Insert Column Chart or Bar Chart, and this first option here. And now if we make this a little bit bigger, we have a nice bar chart of the states and their percent high school graduation. Now we can modify this a little by clicking on the paintbrush, and we can change the color so it's monochromatic, or if you want to change it to black and white, you can choose this option. What we can also do is change this so that the states field will be displayed as a legend rather than down in the bottom as rows. So to do that, we're going to unclick this, drag state over to legend, and now, as you can see, we have the legend of states on the right. You can also change where the legend is by going to Design, Add Chart Element, Legend, and you can put it on the top, bottom, wherever you want to put it. Now, because there are so many states, this legend is not particularly useful, but if there were fewer things to be looked at, it would become more useful. It's very easy to change the graph type. If you want to change the graph from a 2D column to a 2D pie, first thing you're going to want to do is move state back into axis, and then we can go to Insert, 2D pie, and the pie chart, and So you can play around with the legend a little bit to make it more useful. What we can do is move the legend to the side so that the pie chart is visible, but then we'll have to edit the legend, which we can do by making it larger, as well as going to home and changing the text size to something smaller. Now, as you might be able to see, this isn't very useful and it's not a good way to display the data, so we're going to go back to using a bar chart. So we can go back to insert here to change this back into a more useful bar chart. Now we're going to be examining a different part of the data set and trying different graph choices. So we're going to uncheck these, and we can go ahead and remove this chart for now. And again, we're going to want to put state into the rows category, but this time we'll be analyzing total births under 20 in 1991, so we're going to want to drag that to values alongside birth to single teens in 1991. And now if either of them or both of them are count, you're going to want to change that to sum again. And so now what we're going to do is go to insert, and this time we're going to do 2D line. Can make it a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And now you can see that there's 2 lines for the data so we can compare. You can change the graph to make it a little bit more appealing. First, if you click on the y-axis, and if you double click there, this format axis field will pop up, and we can go ahead and change the maximum to what we want. So if we want to make it a little bit smaller, we can change it to 300,000, which allows us to see the spikes in the data better than we could whenever it was at the default. You can also change the number category to number. So if you go down here and change it from general to number, that will add commas to your data. You can also change the units so that it's in thousands, so we have 300 rather than 300,000. It would be good to play around with this format axis to see what you can do, and see how you can change the graphs to more effectively display your data.